Hey YouTube, this is Danny. I have a 2006 Ford F150. It has a two-piece disposable or non-repairable drive shaft, a two-piece drive shaft. From Ford, this drive shaft is $990 plus tax. That doesn't even include the installation cost if you have it done at Ford. The aftermarket drive shaft for this is $475 to $550, and that's priced off of eBay. This here truck is 12 and a half years old, like I said, and we're going to repair it ourselves. So I'm going to show you how to repair a two-piece non-repairable drive shaft. So let's go under the truck. And we're going to show you here. Okay. Here is the housing of the bushing. There's the black bushing, and there's the bearing, and that's the sleeve of the outside of the bearing. That bearing is fused onto the yoke of the drive shaft right here. Okay? And it slipped out right there. Okay, and it went back 2 inches. And when it slips out of the bushing, it bangs around in there if you try to drive it. You can't even get this thing up to 5 miles an hour without it banging around so hard it sounds like a hammer under here, and it vibrates like crazy. That's well before it gets to 5 miles an hour. So you're better off taking this vehicle, having it towed to your house, garage, or to the facility that's going to have it repaired. So it slipped out 2 inches. All right, it's still connected. The back of this drive shaft here, you can see where the rust got cleaned off from the bushing, was all the way to the back of this bushing right here. Okay, and the drive shaft from the transmission part, all right, was back to here, and there was clean metal, shiny metal right here. So it was out for 3 days. So I didn't want any rust to get into the transmission. So what I did was I took this drive shaft, I taped up the seal on the transmission, all right, and then I sanded down to clean bright metal like it is right there, or I made it clean, all right. And when I got done, I blew off all the dirt and everything, untaped it, and cleaned it all up, all right. I centered the bearing housing into the center of the bushing. Can you see that? See, there's the bushing, and then there's the bearing housing, and I centered it back up. All right, and this joint here was compressed all the way, not like it is. It was smaller. All right, so this is where it was able to move backwards. Okay, so what I did was I grabbed the drive shaft here and picked it up, making sure that the sleeve of the bearing that's over the yoke was centered, and I basically picked it up with both hands and shoved it forwards into the transmission, which then moved the back of the axle forward like you see it now, and the housing of the bearing was all the way through the bushing. And so now this is the only thing holding this drive shaft forward. This is the only thing when you buy a new one, or when you buy the vehicle new, is that this is the only thing that holds this drive shaft in the transmission, is this bearing housing into place in these 2 bolts. I never took, the axle out of the transmission. I did start to unbolt it, and then I figured out, I started figuring out that's not how you fix it. And so I bolted it back up in place. You never take it down. You leave all of this in place, and you pick the axle up. I'm sorry, you pick up the drive shaft, and you shove it forward. And then this is what you get. It's back in place now. All right, so it's now back in place, and you got to make sure it stays there. So what I did was I welded 2 clips one to the housing, and the other side of it's leaning onto the housing of the bushing. So to the housing of the bearing, to the housing of the bushing. and I need to grind it off and clean it up and put a couple some primer and paint on it. But it's now holding it in place, and that was about 2 months ago, and she's still operating at normal speeds, and it's fine. So that's basically how you fix the non-repairable drive shaft, is you weld a clip from the housing of the bearing to the housing of the bushing, right there on that side and on this side here. You can see that right there. Okay, that's the other clips. I've welded 2 clips, and I need to clean this clip up also. All right, so the vehicle is now repaired. The non-repairable drive shaft is now fixed. All right. Okay, YouTube, the non-repairable drive shaft, you're going to use a pair of clips. This is 12 gauge sheet metal I cut a little piece off of and then bent like an angle. I used a piece of angle and I cut it down, and that's all you need to fix your non-repairable drive shaft, disposable drive shaft on Ford, is a pair of clips. I used a MIG welder, Miller MIG welder, and like I said, turn it down, and when you think you've turned it down enough, turn it down some more. So the Ford that is your non-repairable drive shaft, 2-piece drive shaft. Thank you very much.